The black teenager shuffled forward, torn jeans, faded t-shirt with holes, sneakers held together by duct tape, carrying a plastic grocery bag. Her voice was soft. "Your Honor, I'm here for the Williams case." "What the hell?" Judge Whitmore slammed his gavel. "Who let this homeless creature in? You smell like the street, girl. Look at you. Dirty clothes, no class, no breeding. Ghetto trash like you is exactly what's wrong with this country." He pointed at her like she was garbage. "Security! Get this filthy thing out before she stinks up my courtroom." The gallery erupted in laughter. Someone yelled, "Go back to the hood!" A teenager went live on TikTok. "Homeless girl gets destroyed." Nobody defended her. 63 years old, 4 generations of power. One white judge who had never lost. But in exactly 3 minutes, he would be the one begging for mercy. 3 days before that moment, in a cramped studio apartment in East Baltimore, a phone rang at 6 in the morning. The apartment was barely 400 square feet. Law books covered every surface, stacked on the floor, piled on chairs, crammed into makeshift shelves made from milk crates. Sticky notes plastered the walls with case citations, legal precedents, and constitutional amendments. A single poster hung above the desk. "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." On a second-hand couch that doubled as a bed, Chloe Turner jolted awake. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, a Harvard Law sweatshirt faded from too many washes, sweatpants with holes in the knees. On the small desk beside her sat a framed photograph. Her mother, her father, her grandmother. 3 faces frozen in time. 3 people who had loved her. All 3 now gone. She grabbed the phone. Unknown number. Normally she'd ignore it, but something made her answer. "Is this Chloe Turner?" The voice on the other end was elderly, trembling. "The lawyer?" Chloe sat up immediately, her mind sharpening. "Who's asking?" "My name is Dorothy Williams. I taught your mama when she was in 3rd grade. Little Grace Turner, brightest child I ever had in my classroom." The woman's voice cracked. "Baby, I'm in trouble. Bad trouble. And I heard you help people like me." People like me. Those 3 words told Chloe everything she needed to know. Dorothy's story came out in fragments, interrupted by tears and trembling breaths. 3 weeks earlier, she had been sitting on a public bench outside Vendella's boutique in downtown Richmond. It was a Tuesday afternoon, nothing special. She was waiting for the bus, reading the weekly newsletter from her church, enjoying the spring sunshine. Then Victoria Ashford Wellington burst out of the boutique. Victoria was the wife of Richard Wellington III, CEO of the largest real estate company in Virginia, golfing buddy of senators and judges, a man whose family had shaped Richmond politics for generations. Victoria herself was a fixture in high society, her face regularly appearing in charity galas and country club newsletters. That day, Victoria was screaming. She stormed across the sidewalk, pointed her finger directly at Dorothy's face, and accused her of scratching her Porsche. The car was parked 20 feet away. Dorothy had never touched it, had never even looked at it. When Dorothy stood up to explain, calmly, politely, the way she had spoken to thousands of students over 44 years of teaching, Victoria grabbed her arm. Her manicured nails dug into Dorothy's skin. Dorothy pulled away instinctively. Anyone would. Victoria stumbled backward, tripped over her own shopping bags, and fell to the ground. And just like that, a 74-year-old retired school teacher became a criminal. The police arrived within minutes, faster than they'd ever responded to calls from Dorothy's neighborhood. Victoria was already crying, already pointing, already performing. The officers didn't ask Dorothy for her side of the story. They didn't look for witnesses. They simply put her in handcuffs and took her away. The security camera footage from the boutique? Mysteriously deleted within hours. The police report? Modified after the fact to describe injuries that didn't exist when officers first arrived at the scene. And the judge assigned to her case? Harold Whitmore III. My public defender quit yesterday, Dorothy said, her voice breaking completely now. Man named Thomas Reed. He seemed decent enough at first, worked hard on my case. Then one day he calls me out of nowhere. Says he can't represent me anymore. Says it's better for everyone. Wouldn't tell me why, wouldn't tell me who called him, wouldn't tell me anything. Just gone. Chloe closed her eyes. She had heard variations of this story before. Lawyers who suddenly developed conflicts of interest. Witnesses who changed their testimony overnight. Evidence that vanished into thin air. It always happened when powerful people wanted something, and powerless people stood in their way. The trial is in 3 days, Dorothy continued. If I go to prison, baby, my heart won't survive it. The doctors said so. And even if it does, at my age, 3 years behind bars is a death sentence anyway. Chloe stared at the photograph on her desk. Her father's face smiled back at her, frozen in a moment before everything fell apart. William Turner had been a good man. A simple man. He worked 2 jobs, janitor at a downtown office building from midnight to 8 in the morning, handyman for various neighbors during the day. He had never taken a sick day in his life. He had never raised his hand to anyone. He had never even gotten a parking ticket. But one night, when Chloe was 5 years old, someone robbed a convenience store across town. The perpetrator was described as a black man, medium build, dark clothing. That description fit half the men in Baltimore. But a witness, a white woman who later admitted she had only seen the suspect from behind at night, from 50 yards away, picked William Turner's photo out of a lineup. That was enough. His public defender was an exhausted young man with 70 other cases and no resources. He spent 4 minutes on William's closing argument. The judge, a man named Richardson, cut from the same cloth as Whitmore, didn't look at William once during the entire trial. The all-white jury deliberated for less than an hour. 25 years. Chloe remembered the moment they read the verdict. She was sitting in the gallery next to her mother, not understanding the words but understanding the screams. Her mother's screams, her own screams, the bailiff pulling her father away. William Turner turned around one last time. His eyes found little Chloe in the chaos. His lips moved, forming 3 words. Be brave. Promise. She promised. 6 years later, when Chloe was 11, a prison guard called their house at 3 in the morning. William Turner had collapsed in his cell. Heart attack. He lay on the concrete floor for 52 minutes before anyone called for medical help. 52 minutes. By the time the ambulance arrived, there was nothing left to save. When Chloe was 14, a letter arrived from the Commonwealth of Virginia. DNA evidence recovered from the original crime scene had been matched to another man, someone already serving time for a different robbery. William Turner was officially exonerated. Innocent. The letter was 3 paragraphs long. It contained the word sorry exactly once. It offered no compensation, no explanation, no accountability. The judge who had sentenced him was still on the bench. The prosecutor who had argued for the maximum sentence had since been promoted. The witness who had identified the wrong man was never charged with perjury. 1 page of paper. That was the state's apology for stealing 9 years of a man's life, for killing him in a concrete cell, for destroying a family. Chloe's mother read the letter once, set it down on the kitchen table, and walked to her bedroom. She didn't come out for 3 days. When she finally emerged, something behind her eyes had died. She moved through the world like a ghost after that, cooking meals she didn't eat, watching television she didn't see, answering questions with words that had no meaning. 11 months later, Grace Turner didn't wake up. The doctors called it heart failure. Chloe, who was 15 by then and had read enough medical textbooks to qualify for college, called it what it really was, a heart that had simply given up. Orphaned at 15, Chloe went to live with her grandmother Ruth. And it was Ruth, fierce, determined Ruth, who had cleaned houses for rich white families her entire life and never once bowed her head, who recognized what others had missed. Chloe Turner wasn't just smart. She was extraordinary. She had taught herself to read at 3, finished her mother's nursing textbooks by 7, corrected her middle school teachers so often they stopped calling on her in class. Her IQ tested at 167, higher than Einstein, higher than Stephen Hawking. Ruth took out a second mortgage on her house, worked double shifts, sold her late husband's car, whatever it took to give her granddaughter every opportunity. Chloe graduated high school at 12, finished Yale, summa cum laude, at 15, completed Harvard Law by 18, and then on her first attempt, she passed the bar exam, becoming the youngest licensed attorney in American history. Ruth Turner was supposed to be there when the results came in. She had talked about nothing else for months. My grandbaby, a lawyer. My grandbaby changing the world. But 3 days before the announcement, Ruth collapsed in her kitchen. Stroke. Massive. Instant. She died holding Chloe's hand, whispering her final words. Make them remember your name, baby. Now Chloe was 19. No parents, no grandmother, no family left at all. Just a promise. And a woman named Dorothy Williams, who had once taught her mother to read, asking for help. Mrs. Williams, Chloe said into the phone, who is the judge assigned to your case? A man named Whitmore. Long silence. I'll be in Richmond tomorrow. That night, after hanging up with Dorothy, Chloe did what she always did before taking a case. She researched. Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness of her apartment as she pulled up everything she could find on Judge Harold Whitmore III. Court records, news articles, legal databases, social media posts, academic papers analyzing sentencing patterns in Virginia courts. What she found made her stomach turn. Whitmore came from old money, the oldest money in Richmond. His great-great-grandfather had built the courthouse that still bore the family name. His great-grandfather had served as a Confederate officer before returning home to become a circuit judge. Generation after generation of Whitmores had sat on that same bench, wearing that same black robe, wielding that same gavel. The street outside the courthouse was still named Whitmore Avenue. In 32 years on the bench, Harold Whitmore III had presided over 243 cases involving black defendants. His conviction rate for those cases was 94%. 94%. For white defendants, the rate was 58%, still high but within normal ranges for Virginia courts. The disparity had been exposed by journalists 3 times. Each time, the story gained traction for a few days, sparked some outrage on social media, then quietly disappeared. No investigation was ever opened. No sanctions were ever imposed. 52 formal complaints had been filed against Whitmore over the years. 52 families who had tried to fight back. Every single complaint had been dismissed. Chloe closed her laptop and looked at her father's photograph. Number 53 is going to be different, Daddy. She opened her closet and stood there for a long moment, studying her options. On the left side hung the clothes she wore to court. Professional blazers, pressed blouses, modest skirts, polished heels. The uniform of a lawyer, the costume that commanded respect. On the right side hung something different. Torn jeans, faded t-shirts, beat-up sneakers. The clothes of someone invisible, someone disposable. Someone that men like Whitmore would never look at twice. She chose the right side. In her 8 months of practicing law, Chloe had learned something important. When she walked into a courtroom wearing a suit, people saw a threat. They put up their guards, chose their words carefully, hid their true feelings behind professional masks. But when she walked in looking like a poor black teenager from the projects, dirty clothes, messy hair, cheap plastic bag instead of a briefcase, they saw nothing worth worrying about. And when people think you're nothing, they show you exactly who they really are. She made a phone call to a law school friend who worked in the Richmond court system. "I need you to register me for the Williams case," she said, "but not as counsel. Register me as family friend of defendant." "Chloe, that's legal, completely legal. I can enter my appearance as attorney at any point during the proceedings. I just want to see how they treat her when they think she's defenseless." A long pause. "You're recording this for the documentary?" Chloe had been working on a documentary about racial bias in Virginia courts for the past 6 months, gathering footage, collecting testimony, building a case that could be presented not to a judge, but to the court of public opinion. "I'm recording this for history." Dorothy Williams lived in a small house on a quiet street in the older part of Richmond. The house told a story, or rather, 2 stories. The first story was written in the photographs that covered every wall. Decades of smiling children, all of them Dorothy's former students. Graduation pictures, handwritten thank you notes, yellowed newspaper clippings announcing scholarships and achievements, a certificate proclaimed Teacher of the Year from 1985, another from 1992, another from 2001, another from 2008. 44 years of shaping young minds, thousands of children who had passed through her classroom. Countless lives changed by her patience, her dedication, her refusal to give up on any student. The second story was written in the damage. The front window was covered with cardboard and duct tape. A brick had shattered it 3 nights ago. The word guilty was spray-painted in red letters across the garage door. A pile of hate mail sat unopened on the kitchen table, envelopes covered in slurs and threats. One letter simply said, "Die, nakak." When Dorothy opened her front door and saw Chloe standing there, she froze. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, one hand rising to her heart. "You look just like your mama. Same eyes, same stubborn chin." "Mama always said I got my stubbornness from Daddy." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. "Your Mama Grace was the brightest child I ever taught. She loved words, loved books, used to stay after school just to read with me." Her voice cracked. "When she passed, I cried for a week. I should have come to the funeral, but I was in the hospital for my heart and I couldn't." "You sent flowers," Chloe said softly. "White lilies, Mama's favorite. She would have loved them." The 2 women embraced in the doorway, holding each other as 40 years of history collapsed into a single moment of shared grief. It was the first time Chloe had cried since her grandmother's funeral. Inside the house, Dorothy showed her everything. The brick that had shattered her window, still sitting on her living room floor. The graffiti on her garage that she couldn't afford to remove. The voicemails on her answering machine, strangers calling to tell her she deserved to die in prison. The message from her church asking her to take a break from services until the trial was over, because her presence was making some members uncomfortable. 44 years, Dorothy said, her hands trembling as she poured tea. 44 years I gave to this community. I taught their children. Victoria Ashford's nephew was in my class. That boy couldn't spell his own name when he came to me, and I worked with him after school every day for 6 months until he caught up. Now these same people, these same families I helped, they look at me like I'm some kind of monster. Her voice broke. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? What happened to giving people the benefit of the doubt? I spent my whole life teaching children to be kind, to be fair, to see the good in others. And now... She couldn't finish. Chloe sat across from her, watching this woman who had survived 74 years with her dignity intact, now being broken by a system that saw her as nothing more than a convenient target. Tell me about your lawyer, Chloe said. The public defender who quit. Dorothy shook her head. Thomas Reed. He seemed like a good man. Worked hard on my case at first. Then one day, just 2 weeks before the trial, he called me. Said he had to withdraw. Said he'd gotten a phone call, someone important, and he couldn't represent me anymore. Said it was better for everyone. Did he say who called him? No, but I could hear it in his voice. Whoever it was scared him half to death. Dorothy looked down at her hands. That's when I knew. They don't want this to go to trial. They want me to plead guilty, admit to something I didn't do, and disappear. Chloe's jaw tightened. What happens if you're convicted? 3 to 7 years, they said, for assaulting someone over 60. Dorothy laughed bitterly. I'm 74 years old. I have stage 3 heart failure. If I go to prison... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. 3 to 7 years in a state penitentiary was a death sentence for someone in Dorothy's condition. The question wasn't whether she would survive the full term. The question was whether she would survive the first winter. That night, after Dorothy went to bed, Chloe sat alone in the living room. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a photograph in a silver frame. A young woman in a graduation cap, beaming at the camera with her whole future ahead of her. Grace Turner, age 17. Dorothy's student. Chloe's mother. The memories came flooding back, unbidden and overwhelming. Her father's arrest. The trial. The verdict. The screams. 6 years of prison visits, watching her father grow smaller and grayer through bulletproof glass. The phone call at 3 in the morning, her mother's collapse, 52 minutes on a concrete floor. The exoneration letter, 3 paragraphs, 1 sorry. No justice. Her mother fading away, her grandmother working herself to death, her father's grave unmarked because they couldn't afford a headstone. And through all of it, one thought burning in her mind like a flame that could never be extinguished. This system is broken. Someone has to fix it. Why not me? I promised, Daddy, she whispered to the empty room. I promised. The next morning, Chloe helped Dorothy get dressed for trial. She straightened the older woman's pearl necklace, a gift from her late husband on their 40th anniversary, and looked into her eyes. When we walk into that courtroom, they're going to look at us and see 2 people they can destroy. Let them. Don't react to anything the judge says. Don't look at Victoria. Don't make eye contact with the jury until I tell you. Dorothy's hands shook as she gripped Chloe's fingers. Baby, I trust you. I just don't trust them. That's the thing about trust, Nana Dot. They have to earn it. We just have to tell the truth. She paused at the door, looking back at this woman who had dedicated her entire life to helping others. And Nana Dot? When I tell you to look at the jury, that's when we win. The morning of the trial arrived gray and heavy. Chloe dressed carefully in the outfit she had chosen back in Baltimore, torn jeans, a faded t-shirt with small holes near the collar, sneakers held together by duct tape. She stuffed her bar card and Harvard diploma deep into a plastic grocery bag. To anyone watching, she looked like a homeless teenager who had wandered in from the street. That was exactly the point. Dorothy stared at her, confused. Baby, why are you dressed like that? You're a lawyer. Don't you want them to know? Chloe shook her head. Not yet. I want them to show us who they really are first. I want the whole world to see what happens when they think we have no power. She pulled out a small device from her bag, a pin-sized camera disguised as a button. Virginia is a one-party consent state. I'm the party. Everything we record is legal. Dorothy's eyes widened. You're going to film them? I'm going to let them film themselves. Chloe pinned the device to her shirt. Men like Whitmore have spent their whole lives being protected. Today, we take that protection away. The walk to the courthouse felt endless. News vans lined the street. Protesters gathered on both sides, some holding signs that said, "Justice for Dorothy," others screaming, "Lock her up." The Ashford family had made sure this case was a spectacle. Chloe kept her head down, shoulders hunched. Dorothy walked beside her, dignified despite her terror. To the cameras, to the reporters, to everyone watching, Chloe Turner was just another poor black girl here to watch her grandmother figure get destroyed by the system. No one looked twice at her. At the security checkpoint, A guard looked Chloe up and down with obvious contempt. "School let out early today?" Chloe made her voice small. "I'm here for the Williams case. She's like family." The guard sighed. "Another one of those. Courtroom B. Don't cause any trouble." Her plastic bag went through the scanner. No one opened it. No one checked for the bar card. No one saw the hidden camera. No one saw anything, because no one expected a black teenager in torn clothes to be anything worth seeing. The courtroom was packed. Victoria Ashford Wellington sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her lawyer, a partner from Richmond's most expensive firm, sat beside her, radiating confidence. At the prosecution table, Daniel Morrison shuffled papers with the lazy ease of a man who had already won. He hadn't even bothered to prepare a real case. Why would he? This was Whitmore's courtroom. The verdict was decided before the trial began. And at the defense table? Empty. Dorothy Williams sat alone in the defendant's chair, small and frightened. Her eyes searched the gallery desperately. Judge Harold Whitmore III entered through a side door. The bailiff called, "All rise," and 60 years of institutional power settled into its throne. Whitmore surveyed his kingdom with the satisfaction of a man who had never been challenged. "Case 2024 CR 0892, he announced. "Commonwealth of Virginia versus Dorothy Williams. Is the defense ready to proceed?" Silence. Whitmore scanned the room impatiently. "Does Mrs. Williams have representation, or are we wasting the court's time?" Dorothy stood, trembling. "Your Honor, my lawyer, he withdrew, and I don't—" "Then you'll be representing yourself." Whitmore cut her off with a dismissive wave. "This court doesn't have time for excuses. Let's get this—" "Your Honor." The voice came from the gallery, soft but clear. Everyone turned. Chloe was standing up, plastic grocery bag in hand, torn clothes, dirty sneakers, looking exactly like what they expected her to be. She stepped into the aisle. That's when Judge Whitmore delivered his verdict, not on the case, but on her. "What the hell? Who let this homeless creature in? You smell like the street, girl. Ghetto trash like you is exactly what's wrong with this country. Security! Get this filthy thing out before she stinks up my courtroom." The gallery laughed. Someone yelled for her to go back to the hood. Victoria Ashford Wellington didn't even bother hiding her smirk. Chloe stood perfectly still. Let them laugh. Let them record. Let them show the world exactly who they were. Then she reached into her plastic grocery bag and pulled out a Harvard law diploma. The laughter stopped. "Your Honor." Her voice had transformed, no longer soft and uncertain, but sharp as steel. "My name is Chloe Turner. I am a licensed attorney in the Commonwealth of Virginia, bar number 94721. I am entering my appearance as counsel for the defense." She walked forward, placed her bar card on the bench, and looked Judge Whitmore directly in the eyes. "I also have my Harvard diploma here if you'd like to verify, though I assume the court can read." The silence that followed was absolute. Whitmore's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and rage before settling into forced composure. His hand shook as he examined her credentials. This is highly irregular," he sputtered. "I'll need to verify." "By all means." Chloe didn't blink. "Take your time. I'll wait." The bailiff, Jerome Wilson, a black man who had worked under Whitmore for 20 years, studied the bar card with wide eyes. He handed it to the judge without a word, but Chloe caught the smallest hint of a smile on his face. Minutes passed. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, Whitmore set down the credentials. His voice was ice. "It appears the bar's standards have declined." "Very well, Miss Turner. Let's see how long you last in a real courtroom." Chloe took her seat at the defense table, right next to Dorothy, who was crying silent tears of hope. Your Honor, Chloe said calmly, I look forward to showing you exactly what I learned at Harvard. The trial had begun. The first day of trial ground forward, and Chloe let the prosecution believe they were winning. Daniel Morrison presented his case with the swagger of a man who had never been challenged. Victoria Ashford Wellington took the stand and delivered a tearful performance. The scratches on her arm, the nightmares, the unprovoked attack by a woman she'd never met. Chloe asked simple questions during cross-examination, polite, non-threatening. She could see Whitmore relaxing, Morrison smirking. They thought she was in over her head. Good. During the lunch recess, Chloe slipped into the courthouse bathroom. She was washing her hands when the door opened hesitantly. A young white woman, early 20s, still wearing her boutique uniform under a jacket, stepped inside. She froze when she saw Chloe. You're the lawyer, right? The one defending Mrs. Williams? Chloe turned slowly. I am. And you are? The woman checked under every stall, terrified. Emily Carter. I work at Vendila's. I was there that day. Chloe's heart rate spiked, but her face remained calm. What did you see? The words poured out of Emily like water from a broken dam. Everything. I saw everything. Mrs. Ashford came into the store already furious. Her credit card got declined 3 times, and she screamed at me in front of other customers, called me incompetent. When she left, she was looking for someone to take it out on. Emily's voice trembled. The old woman, Mrs. Williams, she was just sitting on the bench reading. Didn't look up, didn't say anything. Mrs. Ashford walked straight over to her and started screaming about her car being scratched. It was insane. Who made physical contact first? Mrs. Ashford. 100%. She grabbed Mrs. Williams' arm. The old lady just pulled away, like anyone would, and Mrs. Ashford tripped over her own shopping bags. Emily was crying now. That's it. That's all that happened. Mrs. Williams never touched her. Chloe kept her voice steady. Why didn't you tell the police? Mrs. Ashford's husband. Emily shook her head. The store manager told us to delete the security footage. Said we'd all lose our jobs if we didn't. But She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. I kept a copy. I was scared, but I couldn't just let them destroy an innocent woman. The video was clear as daylight. Victoria storming out of the boutique, face twisted with rage. Dorothy sitting peacefully, reading. Victoria approaching, screaming, pointing. Victoria's hand grabbing Dorothy's arm first. Dorothy pulling back. Victoria stumbling over her own bags and falling. Chloe watched it twice. Then she looked at Emily. Will you testify? Emily's face went pale. The Ashfords own half this town. They'll destroy me. They own property. They don't own truth. Chloe took her hands. Right now, you're the only one who can set an innocent woman free. Long pause. Emily wiped her eyes. I'll do it. That night, Chloe sat in her motel room, staring at the video on her phone. She could file for a mistrial right now, throw everything into chaos. But if she did that, Victoria would have time to prepare. Emily might be intimidated into silence. The evidence might disappear again. No. She needed to let them build their house of lies first, then burn it down in front of the whole world. Tomorrow at 10, she told Emily. Be there. What if they try to stop me? Chloe's jaw tightened. Then they'll be adding witness tampering to their problems. Day 1 resumed with the prosecution riding high. Daniel Morrison stood before the jury like a man accepting an award. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is simple. A respected member of our community was assaulted in broad daylight. Victoria Ashford Wellington has the courage to come forward. She has the injuries to prove it. All we ask is that you deliver the justice she deserves. He gestured toward Dorothy. Don't be fooled by appearances. Violence has no age limit. When it was Chloe's turn, she rose slowly. No notes, no dramatic gestures. She walked to the jury box and made eye contact with each juror, one by one. The prosecution called this case simple. They're right, but not in the way they mean. Her voice was calm, measured. It's simple to look at someone and decide who they are before they speak. It's simple to believe the loudest voice in the room. It's simple to assume that a 74-year-old retired schoolteacher, a woman who spent 44 years shaping young minds, suddenly became violent for no reason. She paused. Simple is easy. Truth is harder. The truth is that Dorothy Williams committed no crime. She was sitting on a public bench, reading a church newsletter, bothering no one. And she was attacked, not physically, but in her dignity, her reputation, her freedom, because someone powerful needed someone powerless to blame. By the end of this trial, you will see that the only assault that happened that day was an assault on the truth itself. She returned to her seat. Dorothy squeezed her hand under the table. Judge Whitmore leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. That was very poetic, Miss Turner. But in my courtroom, we deal in evidence, not speeches. Perhaps wherever you got your degree, emotions were enough. Here, we follow the law. Chloe didn't miss a beat. Of course, Your Honor. Harvard Law taught me that, too, along with the importance of impartial judges. I look forward to seeing both in action. The courtroom gasped. Whitmore's face turned crimson. His gavel hovered in the air. He wanted to hold her in contempt, but she hadn't technically broken any rules. Watch yourself, counselor, he growled. Always, Your Honor. The afternoon brought Victoria back to the stand. This time, Chloe was ready. Mrs. Ashford Wellington, you testified that my client was glaring at you. Can you describe what glaring looks like? Victoria shifted uncomfortably. It's an aggressive look. I see. And was she sitting or standing when she gave you this aggressive look? Sitting on a bench. Was she reading anything? Hesitation. I don't recall. You recall a glare from 20 feet away, but not whether she was holding something in her hands. Interesting. Chloe let the silence hang. You testified that you politely asked if she needed help. Why would you approach a complete stranger sitting on a public bench? She looked out of place. Out of place. Chloe repeated the words slowly, letting them sink into the jury. On a public sidewalk, in broad daylight, reading a church newsletter. What exactly made Mrs. Williams look out of place, Mrs. Ashford Wellington? Morrison shot to his feet. Objection! Counsel is badgering. Sustained! Whitmore's voice was sharp. Move on, Miss Turner. Chloe smiled. Withdrawn. Let's discuss your arm. You claim my client scratched you, but the responding officer's original notes, before they were modified, stated no visible injuries on complainant. How do you explain that? Morrison objected again. Whitmore sustained again, but the jury had heard it. The seed was planted. No further questions, Chloe said. For now. She walked back to her seat, catching a glimpse of juror number 7, a young white woman who had flinched at Whitmore's earlier insults. The woman was leaning forward, watching Chloe with something that looked like hope. One juror with doubt was all she needed. Court adjourned at 4:45, and Daniel Morrison intercepted Chloe in the hallway. You've got tricks, he said quietly, stepping too close. I'll give you that. But this is Whitmore's court, his town, his rules. Plead her out tonight. I'll recommend 3 years, parole in 18 months. Chloe met his gaze. 3 years for a crime that didn't happen. How generous. You don't understand how things work here, little girl. Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're not in Cambridge anymore. This isn't some classroom exercise. Take the deal, or watch your client spend the rest of her life behind bars. I understand perfectly, Chloe replied. You're scared. You should be. She walked away before he could respond. In a small meeting room, Dorothy clutched Chloe's hands like a lifeline. Baby, you were magnificent in there, but that judge, the way he looks at you, at me. He's scared, Nana Dot. He's just too proud to know it yet. Scared? Dorothy shook her head. That man has all the power. Power built on lies is the most fragile kind. Chloe squeezed her hands. Tomorrow I'm calling a witness nobody expects. Someone who saw everything. Who? Someone brave enough to do what's right. That evening, Chloe walked through the parking garage alone. Her footsteps echoed off concrete walls. Most cars had already left. A black SUV idled at the end of the row, engine running, lights off. She kept walking, reached into her pocket for her keys. The SUV pulled forward, blocking her car. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a man's shadowed face. Expensive watch. Cold eyes. Miss Turner, the voice was polite and terrifying. You've made quite an impression today. My employer is concerned. Chloe kept her voice steady. And who is your employer? Someone who values order. Someone who would hate to see a promising young career end prematurely. The man paused. There are other cases, Miss Turner. Other causes. This one isn't worth dying for. Is that a threat? It's advice. Drop the case. Leave Richmond tonight. And everything goes back to normal. The window rolled up. The SUV reversed slowly, then disappeared into the evening. Chloe stood alone in the garage, hands trembling. But her face was steel. Back in her motel room, she stared at her phone. She could leave. She could tell Dorothy to take the plea deal. She could survive. She looked at her wallpaper, her father's face. She dialed Emily. Are you still able to testify tomorrow? Emily's voice shook. Someone followed me home. A car sat outside my apartment for 2 hours. I know. They came to me too. Chloe took a breath. Emily, I won't lie. This is dangerous. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. Long silence. No. Emily's voice steadied. That woman taught my grandmother. She taught half this town. If I stay silent, I'm part of the lie. I won't be part of the lie. Then I'll see you at 10. Stay safe. Chloe hung up and sat in the dark. Tomorrow she would walk back into that courtroom, back into Whitmore's domain. She would call a witness no one expected, present evidence they thought was destroyed, and she would either win or lose everything. At 3 in the morning, she wrote 3 words on a legal pad. Truth wins tomorrow. Day 2 began with whispers. Word had spread through Richmond overnight. Something was happening in the Williams case. The gallery was packed. Reporters crowded the hallway. Even the bailiff looked tense. Chloe waited on the courthouse steps, scanning the crowd. 9:45, 9:50, 9:55. No Emily. Her chest tightened. Had they gotten to her? Had the threats worked? Then, movement at the corner. Emily Carter appeared, walking fast despite an obvious limp. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. She was clutching her phone like a weapon. They slashed my tires last night, she said, reaching Chloe. I walked 3 miles. Chloe stared at her. You walked? I wasn't going to let them stop me. Chloe took her hand. Let's finish this. At 10:15, the courtroom fell silent as Chloe rose to her feet. Your Honor, the defense calls Emily Carter. Chaos erupted. Victoria went white. Morrison leaped up, shouting objections. This witness wasn't on any list. This was improper. This was... Your Honor. Chloe's voice cut through the noise. "I only learned of Miss Carter's testimony yesterday during recess. Under Brady v. Maryland, exculpatory evidence must be presented regardless of timing. This witness has information vital to the defense." Whitmore wanted to refuse. Every line of his body screamed it, but the law was clear. "Overruled," he said through gritted teeth. "The witness may proceed." Emily took the stand. Her hands shook, but her voice was clear. "I work at Vendella's boutique. I was there the day of the incident." "What did you observe?" Mrs. Ashford Wellington came into the store already upset. Her credit card was declined 3 times and she screamed at me in front of other customers. When she left, she was furious. She walked straight to where Mrs. Williams was sitting on the bench. "Did Mrs. Williams do anything to provoke her?" "No, she was just reading. She didn't even look up until Mrs. Ashford started shouting." "And what happened next?" Emily took a breath. "Mrs. Ashford grabbed Mrs. Williams' arm. Mrs. Williams pulled away, like anyone would, and Mrs. Ashford fell over her own shopping bags." The jury stirred. Several members glanced at Victoria, who was gripping her chair like she might shatter it. "Who made physical contact first?" Chloe asked. "Mrs. Ashford." Emily's voice was firm now. 100%. Chloe turned to the judge. "Your Honor, Miss Carter has in her possession the original security footage from that day, footage that the boutique was instructed to delete, but which she preserved." The courtroom exploded. Victoria shot to her feet, screaming, "That's stolen property! She had no right!" "Order!" Whitmore slammed his gavel. "Mrs. Ashford Wellington, sit down!" Morrison objected frantically. Chain of custody, authentication, procedure. Chloe produced forensic documentation proving the video's authenticity, its metadata, its timestamp. Whitmore had no legal grounds to exclude it. "The video will be admitted," he said, the words sounding like they were being pulled from his throat with pliers. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life, and the whole world watched the truth. Victoria Ashford Wellington storming out of the boutique, face contorted with rage. Dorothy Williams sitting peacefully, reading her newsletter. Victoria approaching, screaming, pointing. Victoria's hand reaching out and grabbing Dorothy's arm first. Dorothy pulling back in surprise. Victoria stumbling over her own shopping bags. Victoria falling. Victoria lying on the ground, already performing for the cameras that would later arrive. The video ended. Silence. Then, everywhere at once, gasps, murmurs, the scratch of reporters' pens, the click of phones. Morrison had his head in his hands. Victoria was frozen, her mask finally shattered. Dorothy was crying quietly, tears of relief streaming down her face. Even Judge Whitmore couldn't hide the twitch in his jaw. Chloe recalled Victoria to the stand. "The video shows you grabbing my client first. Would you like to revise your testimony?" "That video it's misleading. I felt threatened." "By a 74-year-old woman reading a church newsletter." Chloe produced another document. Defense Exhibit C, transaction records from Vendella's boutique. 3 declined credit card attempts. A customer complaint filed by staff describing verbally abusive behavior. Victoria sputtered. "I was having a difficult day. So difficult that you needed someone to blame. Someone you thought no one would believe. Someone who looked out of place." Chloe stepped closer. "Mrs. Ashford Wellington, you weren't defending yourself. You were embarrassed, humiliated, and you found the most powerless person you could and tried to destroy her. That's not—" No further questions. Closing arguments came, and Chloe stood before the jury one final time. 14 months ago, I stood in another courtroom, not as a lawyer, as a daughter. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. I was 14 years old, watching my father receive an apology from the state that had stolen his life. He'd been dead for 3 years by then. The apology came too late to save him. Too late to save my mother, who died of grief. Too late for anything except words that could never undo what had been done. The jury was frozen, hanging on every word. I became a lawyer because I made a promise. I promised I would fight for the people this system forgets, the people it dismisses, the people it looks at and sees guilty before they ever open their mouths. Dorothy Williams is not a criminal. She is a teacher, a widow, a woman who spent 44 years giving everything she had to this community. And in one afternoon, because one powerful woman needed someone to blame, she almost lost it all. You've seen the video. You've heard the truth. Now you have a choice. You can be part of the system that killed my father, the system that sees a black woman and sees a threat. Or you can be the moment when justice finally wins. She looked at each juror, one by one. Dorothy Williams is innocent. We all know it. Now let's make it official. 90 minutes later, the jury returned. The foreman, an older white man Chloe had worried about, stood. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Whitmore asked, his voice hollow. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of assault, how do you find?" The foreman lifted his chin. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Dorothy Williams, not guilty." The courtroom erupted. Dorothy collapsed into Chloe's arms, sobbing. Supporters in the gallery cheered. Victoria Ashford Wellington stormed out without looking back. Morrison sat motionless, staring at his failed notes like they belonged to someone else. And Jerome Wilson, the bailiff who had served under Whitmore for 20 years, who had witnessed countless injustices and said nothing, wiped tears from his eyes. As the crowd cleared, Whitmore called Chloe to the bench. His face was gray. "You think you've accomplished something here?" Chloe met his gaze. "An innocent woman is going home tonight instead of to prison. So yes. You're young. You don't understand how things work. There are forces bigger than one case." "You're right, Your Honor, there are." Chloe's voice hardened. "That's why everything that happened in this courtroom, your comments about my clothes, your attempts to block evidence, your sustained objections designed to protect Mrs. Ashford, all of it has been recorded. By me, by the courtroom cameras, by your own court reporter." Susan Davis stopped typing, looked up, gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I've also compiled 31 years of your rulings," Chloe continued. "The statistical patterns, the complaint files. All of it was delivered to the Virginia State Bar's Ethics Committee 2 hours ago, before the verdict, because I wanted you to know, even if you'd found a way to convict her, you were already finished." Whitmore's face went from gray to white. "You asked if I understand how things work." Chloe leaned in. "I do. Men like you have run courtrooms like this for generations. You thought it would last forever." She straightened. "Forever just ended." She turned and walked away. Her sneakers squeaked on the marble floor. Behind her, Judge Harold Whitmore III sat alone in his empty courtroom, surrounded by portraits of his ancestors, watching his legacy crumble into dust. Outside, on the courthouse steps, golden sunlight broke through the clouds. Dorothy took Chloe's face in her hands, tears streaming down both their cheeks. "You gave me my life back, baby girl. You gave me my name. How do I ever repay that?" Chloe smiled. "You already did, Nana Dot. Every student you taught for 44 years, every life you touched, that's how you repay it. You live, loud and proud and free." Dorothy pulled her into an embrace. "Your Mama Grace, your Daddy William, your Grandmother Ruth, they're all watching right now. And baby, they are so proud." Chloe closed her eyes. "I know. That's why I keep going." 3 weeks after the trial, Judge Harold Whitmore III announced his immediate retirement. The official reason was health concerns. The real reason was a state bar investigation that would eventually uncover 31 years of documented racial bias, exposed at last by a 19-year-old lawyer in torn jeans. 4 months later, the Richmond County Courthouse was renamed. Its new name, the William Turner Justice Center, honoring a janitor who died in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and whose daughter refused to let his story be forgotten. Victoria Ashford Wellington was charged with filing a false police report, perjury, and witness intimidation. She pled guilty to avoid trial. Her husband filed for divorce the same week. Emily Carter received a full scholarship to law school. She graduated 3 years later with honors and joined Chloe's legal team on her first day as an attorney. Thomas Reed, the public defender who had been forced to withdraw from Dorothy's case, finally testified about the threats he'd received. His testimony helped convict 2 more people connected to the cover-up. And Dorothy Williams? She returned to her church the Sunday after the verdict. When she walked through the doors, the congregation rose to their feet. The applause lasted 10 minutes. She cried the whole time. As for Chloe Turner, she didn't stop at one case. She founded the Promise Project, named after the promise she made to her father. A free legal clinic dedicated to fighting wrongful convictions and systemic injustice. In its first 2 years, it helped over 300 families find justice. She still teaches twice a week, still wears her torn jeans and sneakers, because the day she has to change who she is to be respected is the day the system wins. In a classroom in Baltimore, filled with young faces of every color, Chloe stands at the front and speaks. They will underestimate you. They will dismiss you. They will look at your skin, your age, your clothes, and decide you're nothing. She smiles, that same quiet smile from the courtroom. That's not a setback. That's a strategy. Let them underestimate you. Let them feel safe, and then, she pauses, show them exactly who you are. Chloe Turner was 19 years old. She had already changed the world once, and she was just getting started. The next time someone looks at you and sees nothing, make sure they remember the lesson. If this story moved you, if you've ever been dismissed before you could speak, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because every single day, in courtrooms and classrooms and boardrooms all over the world, there's another Chloe, another Dorothy, another truth waiting to be told. Like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because we're just getting started.